You're thinking about moving to Bluffton, South Carolina. In today's video, we're going to go over the pros and the cons, the strengths and the weaknesses of Bluffton, South Carolina. So let's get started. You want to know everything there is to know about the South Carolina Lowcountry, whether it's Bluffton, Beaufort, Hilton Head Island, or Jasper County, then subscribe below and tap that bell for notifications so you'll be the first to know about the current market in the South Carolina Lowcountry. My name is David Simcox, host of Lowcountry Lifestyles and a local realtor. I get calls and emails every day from people just like you and you and you and you looking to make their move to the South Carolina Lowcountry, and I absolutely love it. So whether you're making your move in 3 days or 3 months, give me a call, shoot me a text, send me an email, or book a Zoom call, all in the description down below, so I can help you find your Lowcountry lifestyle. Today, we're looking at the pros and the cons of Bluffton, South Carolina. Bluffton, South Carolina is a cheerful and vibrant town on the banks of the May River. It's located off of Highway 278 in between I-95 and Hilton Head Island. Bluffton, South Carolina is one of the fastest growing areas in the state of South Carolina. And as some of you may know, the fastest growing parts of the United States are South Carolina, Texas, and Florida. So you could say that being one of the fastest growing parts of South Carolina, this is also one of the fastest growing parts of the United States. And there's a reason for it. It absolutely comes down to the quality of life. The current population of Bluffton, South Carolina is about 30,000. And that has really exploded over the last 20 years. Bluffton, South Carolina started out as a very small little fishing village on the banks of the May River. It was actually just a 1 square mile by 1 square mile area right in what is currently known as Old Town. And Old Town is this absolutely quaint, charming little historic area with shops and restaurants and nightlife and antique shops and art galleries. And it is just the most charming little fishing village you've ever seen. And from there, Bluffton really exploded out over the past 20 years and now is a much larger area, but a lot of people still love to come to the downtown Old Town area. Bluffton, South Carolina was actually founded in 1728, so it's been around for a long time. It played some key and pivotal roles back in the Civil War and throughout Southern history. Bluffton, South Carolina definitely has a very unique vibe about it, and I would call it Lowcountry chic, because a lot of folks coming to Bluffton, South Carolina are from outside areas like New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Ohio, California. So although it does have that southern vibe to it, it's kind of like an eclectic southern vibe that's a bit of a mashup between all these other cultures that have come in. So yes, it is southern, but you're also going to see a little bit of glitz and glamour, folks coming in from the outside area. So you'll see some high-end vehicles, you'll see the Porsches and the Lambos and things like that driving around Old Town. So it's actually pretty cool. So let's get started with pro number 1. So pro number 1 for Bluffton, South Carolina is the location. It is extremely centrally located to some of the greatest places in the Southeast. So we're only about 25-30 minutes from Savannah, Georgia, which is a huge tourist hotspot. We're only about an hour and a half and change from Charleston, South Carolina. We are next door neighbors with Hilton Head Island, which Hilton Head Island has been a beach resort since the 1950s. And people have been coming and loving that island for a long time. And we're just across the bridge from Hilton Head Island. So you can still enjoy the beaches without all the crowds. And we're only about 20 minutes away from Beaufort, South Carolina. And Beaufort is where Parris Island, where the Marine Corps basic training is. So we have a lot of folks that come into town for those basic training graduations. So it is extremely centrally located. So pro number 2, I'm going to call this pro river life. Because Bluffton is located on the May River, the river is what it's all about. So people are boating and fishing and kayaking and paddleboarding on the May River almost all year round because the weather's so nice. It may get a little chilly in the winter. They're out fishing and crabbing and catching oysters and watching dolphins swim in the river. And one of the coolest things about the river is because it is has salt water, it's tidal, and so it goes up and down, and when it goes down there's a sandbar that emerges, and the sandbar becomes the local hotspot. So during the summertime you'll see hundreds of boats pull up on the sandbar, and everybody unloads their coolers and their dogs and their kids, and everybody just runs up and down on the sandbar. It's almost like a beach. It's really an awesome, fun place to hang out during the summertime. People will bring their speakers out, and it's just a great place to connect with your friends and meet new friends and just have a really, really good time during the summer. So that brings me to con number 1. So one of the things, Bluffton does not have a beach, and people ask that all the time, but it does have the river. And it doesn't have a beach unless you want to count Alljoy Beach. Alljoy is a little tiny beach on the May River, and there are some parking spots down there, and so you can actually park down there and swim in the May River, and we kind of call that our local beach in Bluffton. But if you want to go to the beach, you just have to go across the bridge over to Hilton Head Island. Like I said, 15-20 minutes you're on the beach, but Bluffton does not have its own beach. So let's move on to the next pro. The next pro is Bluffton does not have as many tourists as its neighboring Hilton Head Island. So Hilton Head Island is definitely a huge tourist destination, overrun with tourists a large part of the year, and Bluffton mostly is made up of people living here full time. So you're not going to have as much tourist activity around Bluffton. It's starting to grow. You are starting to see more folks that are stopping in from Hilton Head and spending a day over in Old Town, but it's not the huge tourist vibe. And that actually helps when it comes to like restaurants. You're not having to wait in line at some of your favorite restaurants in Bluffton, to where if you were in Hilton Head, you might have quite a long wait during the tourist season. Let's move on to pro number 4. So the next pro of Bluffton is it has a really cute little downtown area, which, as I mentioned, was called Old Town. And that is where Bluffton started. It started as a 1 square mile area right on the banks of the May River. And it is absolutely charming and amazing to walk around. It's got shops, it's got wonderful restaurants. Some of my favorite restaurants are like the Toomer Seafood House. I love Captain Woody's. I love the Old Town Dispensary, eating outside there, and they have live music outside. I love, there's just a ton of great restaurants down there. They have the Bluffton Farmers Market once a week with a lot of local farmers and artisans that come out. You could walk right down to the May River, and it's just absolutely charming and wonderful. They've got antique shops, they've got art galleries, they've got festivals galore, and it hasn't lost its kind of historic charm. So there is pretty strict guidelines when it comes to preservation, conservation, and if you're going to rehabilitate a building in the Old Town area, it has to maintain that same look and that same feel. So I'm going to talk about the next con, and really this could be a pro or a con, but I'm going to list it as a con, that there's not many locals, okay? So it's very rare. It's almost like finding a unicorn if you meet a Bluffton local, because it did start off as such a small town that there's very few people that are born, raised, and their families go back multiple generations in Bluffton. the majority of the people currently living in Bluffton are from somewhere else. They're from New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Ohio, California, and continuing on from there. So that's good and bad, right? So if you live there, not many locals, but if you are coming from one of these outside areas, you're almost guaranteed to run into other folks that are from where you're at back home. So it could be positive or it could be negative. And the locals are really great. They're super cool about sharing their beautiful little town with all the new people that have come in. They're not like, snooty, like, oh, locals rule and people that have come in drool or anything like that. They're really cool. I know a lot of locals because my wife's family's from here multiple generations back, so I'm lucky enough to know who the locals are. That leads me on to another con of Bluffton, or another negative of Bluffton. I put a poll out on my Facebook page, and somebody mentioned that they feel like Bluffton growth has outpaced the infrastructure. I don't know if that's true or not, but they feel like maybe the schools and the roads and the infrastructure is not keeping up with the demand and the growth that Bluffton is experiencing. So you can comment down below and tell me whether or not you think that's true. I know some of the schools are having to add, extra buildings and things to try to keep up, but I actually think Bluffton is doing a pretty good job of staying ahead of the growth curve. But you be the judge, you tell me, comment down below, tell me whether or not you think the infrastructure is lagging behind or staying ahead of the current growth in Bluffton. All right, so I kind of touched on this before, but I think a major pro of Bluffton is it has some really great restaurants. And a lot of those restaurants are based around the Old Town area, but not all of them. So right in the Old Town area, of course, you've got Captain Woody's, you've got Toomer's Seafood House, you've got the Bluffton Room, which is absolutely incredible if you want some fine dining. You've got the Farm, you've got some really great places. Then down on May River Road, off of 278, you have some restaurants around the outlets. And one of my all-time favorite restaurants is Saigon Cafe, which serves pho soup. And so me and a bunch of my buddies actually get together about once a week and have pho soup together. We call ourselves the Pho Bros, and I absolutely love that. Off of May River Road, there's a place called Cahill's, and Cahill's is absolutely one of my favorite restaurants. It's a farm-to-table restaurant, so the Cahill family actually owns farmland behind the restaurant, and they grow all of their own produce. And so it started off as just kind of a roadside produce stand, at least that's what I was told, and then they have converted it into a restaurant. And they're most well known for their chicken and waffles, so fried chicken and waffles. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but that's actually a big thing here in the South. But they've got all kinds of incredible food in there. I go in there usually once every couple weeks, and I just love the fresh produce that comes as a side with whatever dish I get. I think they have one called the Mariner's Meal. They've got a bunch of different options. Another positive part of living in Bluffton is they have great seafood because it's on the May River, and the May River, feeds out to the ocean by Hilton Head and by Defusky Island. They have amazing oysters, and you'll come to find out living in Bluffton that one of the biggest things to do in and around Bluffton is to go to an oyster roast, and that's like a social gathering during the winter time. So everybody invites their friends and family and neighbor over. They have like a bonfire in the backyard, and they actually cook oysters either over a steam pot, or like the traditional way is they actually build an open fire. They put a grate over the fire, and they put the oysters on the fire, and they lay wet burlap sacks on top of the oysters to let them steam, and then they put them out on these tables that are like communal tables, and everybody stands around and shucks oysters together and maybe has a cold beer or a cold beverage. And it's really an awesome thing to do during the winter time to hang out with your friends. They have great shrimp, they have great fish, they have great seafood. If you love to fish, you can either get a boat or you can charter a fishing boat from one of the local charter companies. But definitely seafood is amazing here in Bluffton. So let's move on to a couple of the negatives, okay? There's not many, but there are a couple. So people coming in from out of town always ask me, as a realtor, they want to know about alligators and they want to know about hurricanes. And the answer is yes and yes. There are alligators, but that's one of the things I love about the South Carolina Lowcountry is I actually think they're really cool to look at. They're like old dinosaurs crawling around. And as long as you don't bother them and you don't get in their way and you don't like walk your little dog Fluffy up next to an alligator, you're going to be fine. Don't feed the alligators, don't bother them, don't annoy them, and they're going to leave you alone. Almost any golf course that you go to in South Carolina, you're gonna see an alligator walking across the golf course. That's actually what makes it cool. I love the nature, I love the birds, I love the alligators, I love everything about it. I love the dolphins swimming out in the ocean, out in the May River, and alligators are just part of it. So they're probably not gonna bother you if you don't bother them. Hurricanes, yes, anywhere on the East Coast you are going to be affected by hurricanes, and it's part of life. If you lived in California, you've got wildfires, you've got earthquakes. If you're in the Midwest, you've got tornadoes. I guess everybody has their thing, and for us it is hurricanes. And yes, every few years, you know, some of us choose to evacuate. Depends how far inland you live. If you're on Hilton Head, yeah, you probably are going to evacuate. If you're in Bluffton, maybe. It depends on the hurricane. The further inland you live, the less likely that you're going to have to evacuate. But you always have that choice. And, you know, I have evacuated a few times, but I also lived in South Florida for almost 15 years, so I'm kind of used to it. Not a big deal to me, but yes, they are here. It is part of life here. The final con or negative to Bluffton is there really isn't much in the way of short-term rentals, meaning if you wanted to either stay in an Airbnb or a VRBO, or if you wanted to be an investor and buy an Airbnb or a VRBO type of property, there's not many places in Bluffton that allow that. And right across the bridge in Hilton Head, there's tons of vacation rentals. But Bluffton, they'll allow some of them down around the Old Town area. There is a neighborhood called Bluffton Park, which is next to Old Town. They will allow some in there. But for the most part, Bluffton makes it difficult for people to do short-term rentals. So maybe that's a positive, maybe it's a negative. You decide. Comment below, tell me whether you think that's a pro or a con. And the last pro that I want to talk about in Bluffton is related to housing. And it's that the housing is newer inventory, and they're in planned communities with wonderful amenities. So Bluffton was really well planned out, and so the majority of the housing stock is within communities, and some of them are called plantations or neighborhoods or whatever you want to call them. Some of them are gated, some of them are not gated, but the majority of them have some types of amenities, meaning swimming pools, golf courses, pickleball, tennis. Some of them have equestrian, all different variety of amenities and costs associated with that. And the cost that's associated with that is called a POA, or a Property Owners Association. And so most neighborhoods you move into are going to have some kind of annual fee. It could be $500 a year, it could be $20,000 a year. It really just depends on the level of amenities and exclusivity of that particular neighborhood. But the majority of the houses are newer, types of fit and finishes that people want to see. Lots of granite, lots of quartz counters, big beautiful cabinetry in the kitchen, open floor plans, to where, like, if you went across the bridge over to Hilton Head, the majority of that was built out like in the 80s. So it's more dated, it's more kind of old school architecture, 1980s style. A lot of it needs to be updated. Some of it has polybutylene pipes. So, you know, there are some issues with the Hilton Head housing stock, where right across the bridge in Bluffton, you've got newer, nicer, more modern houses with more modern floor plans and more modern amenities. So that basically wraps up my pros and cons of Bluffton, South Carolina. I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, if I can help you find your Lowcountry lifestyle, feel free to comment down below, subscribe, tap that bell for notifications so you'll be the first to know about the current market in the South Carolina Lowcountry. You can always reach me by phone, by text, by email, or schedule a Zoom call, all in the description down below. And until next time, my name is David Simcox with Lowcountry Lifestyles, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day.